I'm Dana Han-Klein here with Joe Wright for Darkest Hour.
What do you admire most about Winston Churchill? The actual Winston Churchill.
The actual Winston Churchill. What do I admire most about
he's
him?
Yeah, an interesting
he's a
figure.
tricky character, and I don't necessarily agree with all his policies. In fact, I certainly don't agree with all his policies, and nor do I always admire his behaviour. But he was extremely tenacious and refused to be cowed by the unarguably stronger forces of the Nazi army. And so I admire his tenacity, his dogged tenacity.
Are you a big researcher? Do you like to do every history textbook that pertains to the era? Or are you
It
more
would be
of a
impossible to read everything that's ever been written about Winston Churchill. So you have to kind of be selective, really, and that will colour your view of him. So I try to read biographies and works about Churchill that some are complimentary, some are less so. Also, I found the more intimate portraits of him, the letters between him and his wife, and the writings by people like his secretary, to be really, really useful.
What do you think the most unexpected thing you learned about him through the course of doing the research was?
The level to which he doubted himself. You think of Churchill as being this kind of single-minded force, refusing to ever accept anything other than, all-out war. And actually you find someone who is riddled with doubt and crises of self-confidence.
What do you think it is about World War II, and particularly the leaders of the time, that keeps drawing us back to that material? Because I feel like, especially in the last few years, we've seen a lot of retelling or reminders of that era.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. If I knew, then I'd possibly be able to predict what
the next in vogue decade will be.
Yeah. Although I do think that it's important. I do think it's important in times of uncertainty to examine history and learn from it. Churchill certainly did that. And I think it's really important and really useful. Without, it very easily tips over into nostalgia, and that's not particularly useful. Wasn't it better then? That's not useful at all.
What draws you to period pieces? Because you've made quite a few over your career, including one about that era already.
Yeah, I suppose the 20th century fascinates me because my father was born in 1906. And passed away in 1991. And so it's a way of getting closer to his experience of life. So maybe there's something to do with that. There's also just the fact that, I kind of relate to the past in a way better than I do the present.
Why would you say
it's
that?
Not good, is it?
What makes you think that, though?
I'm not living in the now, am I? I don't know. I really don't know. There's also something about having that sort of separation of time allows you to see things more clearly, possibly.
So Churchill is a larger-than-life character on his own. And how do you prevent it from becoming like a caricature performance of him?
Detail, really. Detail and study and specificity. Try saying that 10 times fast.
Try saying that as Churchill 10 times.
Specificity. It's one tries to be as very specific to the character, to the moments, to the time as possible, and then hopefully it will have a honesty and truth, and then hopefully therefore it will have an honesty for the viewers.
Was it always working, or were there moments that you had to kind of adjust? Because Gary, I didn't even realize for a while it was Gary Oldman, and then I was like, oh, that's Gary Oldman.
Yeah, we spent like 6 months preparing the makeup and the look, and when we started out, there were many iterations of the makeup, and the first one was like way too far. So it looked, more like Churchill, but you couldn't see any performance underneath this kind of, plastic face. So it was about finding the sweet spot between it looking enough like Churchill and yet also being open enough for Gary to perform with.
What do you think the toughest scene, either logistically or emotionally, to shoot was?
The war cabinet scenes were tough. Sort of 10 pages of dialogue, 17 men sat around a table.
A very odd table too.
Yeah. And so creating, I had this idea that it could play like a political thriller, but creating that tension and that shape in those scenes was an exciting challenge. But they did it in 12 Angry Men, so, for a whole movie.
But yeah, it's very confined.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to be that limited in what you have available.
Yeah, I think like the constraints and I don't want to say claustrophobia, but that limitation definitely, I'm sure is challenging.
But exciting.
Yeah,
and you can use it, and if you go with it, rather than trying to fight against it, you can find some exciting, interesting stuff.
I also love that there was just nowhere to go, right? You can't like storm out of the room and be like, I don't want to have this discussion. You're just party too. Sound in your movies and sound and soundtrack. Do you think about that from the very beginning, or do you really?
Yeah.
Do you work with like your sound designer to start? Is it written in the script?
Yeah, I went to art school and did fine art, film and video, so it wasn't like a normal film school. There was no one doing like drama or anything. And we had this amazing sound tutor who firmly believed that film was 50% sound and 50% image.
See, mine said it was 51% sound and 49%.
I'd beg to differ on that one. But so that level of attention to sound and I don't think, when I think about a scene, when I'm reading a script or when I'm just daydreaming on my sofa, I'm thinking in cinema. I'm thinking in the sound and image and the relationship between the two, and movement and time. And so it's always about sound. You can't. That's what you've got to play with. That's the tools.
I think it also can dramatically change something. Afterwards.
Completely. Or it can support something. Or it can, whatever you want it to do. I like it when sound contrasts the image. And I enjoy the contrasts of sound. And then sometimes you just have to let it kind of just be a support.
What inspires you?
Drama. I love drama. And what I love about it is the way that for me it's very simply about how humans interact. And so I'm constantly inspired by that, by how I see people interacting, by the attempt to connect with another human being. Often, failed attempt to connect with another human being, but the attempt is all.
What frustrates you?
Jobs worths. People who don't really, people who just. Do you know what jobs worth is? Do you have that phrase?
No, I don't think so. Enlighten me.
Jobs worth is someone who goes, you can't do this, you can't do that because it says in the guidebook you can't do it. You know what I mean? It's that kind of attitude.
Naysayers and rule to a T followers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get that. What's one thing you wish I had more time for?
Love.
That's so sad. That's such a sad answer.
Is it? Is that sad?
I don't know.
Reading.
Okay.
Books.
It's slightly less sad.
Yeah, it's a bit less sad.
Okay. Living or dead, who's someone you'd like to collaborate with that you haven't already?
Betty Davis.
What role would you cast her in?
I don't know, that's a much longer thought to have. I've never thought of that, and that would take some thinking about. It's an important question. But I have no idea at this moment.
Is there a type of story that you haven't told yet that you'd like to tell next?
I suppose a musical. I suppose I'd like to do a musical one day.
How do you define success?
Being able to look at yourself in the mirror.
It's a good definition.
Yeah.
And who was your favorite childhood fictional hero or heroine growing up?
The Little Mermaid.
Really? You're going to have to elaborate. That's a great answer. But
well, my dad ran a puppet theatre, and my favourite show of his was The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, and
so we're talking about the very dark version, the
Hans Christian Andersen version,
not the Disneyfied.
and I loved her, and I wanted to marry her and save her, and she inspired me in her devotion and love.
That's a wonderful answer. Well, thank you so much. Congratulations on the film.